Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. Hikers or campers of Reddit, what's the creepiest or scariest thing you've seen in the woods? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Once when I was younger, I was camping with my mom, my sister, and her new boyfriend. I woke up one night after not being able to sleep as usual, and I went into the car so I could play on my phone without waking anyone up. Eventually, I noticed our dog on the riverbank a little ways ahead of our campsite. She was pretty small, despite being part pit bull. Imagine a miniature pitty, which made me worried about her being alone in the dark. I went outside to see what she was doing, since she shouldn't have been out of the tent. There on the other side of the river, which was not too wide, was a figure, the thing she was staring at intently. I ran back to the car because I was little, and I'd seen enough scary movies to know the dangers of spooky figures in the woods. My dog followed me into the car, and I locked it and stayed in there for the rest of the night. The thing is, I kept seeing him. He would be watching us day or night on the other side. I couldn't quite even make him out, except that he was wearing a hat and was most definitely pale-skinned. I didn't want to tell anyone because I didn't know if it was real, but my dog always noticed him too. Later, back home, my mom's boyfriend was laughing and talking about how there was a homeless guy taking stuff from our garbage at the campsite, and he didn't tell my mom because she would have freaked. Which she did, scolding him for not telling us. I guess whoever I saw was probably the same man. I am the grandchild of some farmers from the charming county of Cornwall in England. There are massive woods surrounding my great-grandfather's home and only really one neighbor who lives a little down the road. Exploring these woods was a load of fun when I was young, and I would do it all the time. I don't know if you could call it hiking, but when you get deep into the woods, civilization disappeared. After going with my family a few times, it was figured I had a pretty good head and was allowed to go out on my own. I was about 14 at the time. There were no dangerous animals or anything in there, so I went on an adventure. I kept a good track and never got lost, and after a couple of days exploring, I found a path emerging from the bushes. Now, this was further out than I was technically allowed to go, but I was 14 and broke rules. This was interesting to me because there were only two paths I was told about, and it seemed very cold and faded past the big mangle of bushes. I couldn't pinpoint its location on flat terrain, but it appeared to linger slightly on the long slope leading to the top of a hill. I happily went up the hill to the top and found something really strange. There was a tea party set up in the middle of the forest. Seriously. There were plastic chairs, a plastic table, a teapot, and teacups made from china. This weirded me out like crazy, but at the time I sort of dismissed it. 2 years later, after I'd grown up a little, I went looking for the plastic chairs and table. I hadn't really mentioned it to anyone yet, but I'd realized just how weird it was, and I wanted some kind of proof. Plastic chairs had been scattered by some animal, I assume, but what was really weird was that the plastic table was ripped almost in half. I couldn't find the teacups or teapot anywhere. I later went back and talked about the tea set, and everyone seemed very confused. There were no kids anywhere, and the only kids who had grown up there had been my great-grandmother and her siblings, who certainly didn't lug a weird tea set out there. Everyone promptly forgot about it, but I'm still weirded out to this day. It was like something from a fairy tale horror film, now that I think about it. 2 stories. 1. This happened about 3 years ago or so. 4 of us hiking near Pinehurst, California. I can't remember the exact trail we were on, but maybe about 5 miles from the trailhead, we see a couple of packs splayed out in the field. It looked like somebody was exploring the cliff face just beyond. We get a little concerned but go on our way. 4 days later, we return and find the bags still there. We check it out, and find some well-prepared packs, meals lined up day by day, clothes, same thing, a couple of bottles of Jack and one almost empty, two unopened, and a few boxes of ammo. It appeared as though no one had touched the items since our arrival 4 days ago. We marked the location on our map and reported to the ranger on our way out. I kept checking online for reports from the area, but never found out what happened. Phew, this was probably 15 years ago. I was about 13 or 14 and doing a 50-miler over the course of a week. This was in the High Sierras northern Kings Canyon area. We're doing switchbacks down to a lake for the night, and about halfway down, this horrible smell of death permeates the air. As we get closer, we see a half-decomposed deer just off the side of the trail. The deer's insides are exposed, its rib bones protrude, and an overwhelming number of flies are present. It obviously was all a bunch of 13 to 15-year-old kids could talk about that night around the campfire. We all get ready to sleep, and around midnight we're all woken up by some kid blowing his whistle as loud as he could. We all freak out, start blowing ours, and wave our flashlight like crazy. Finally, everyone calms down, and we look around to see what was going on, and a bear had come through the campsite looking for candy that this kid had left in his bag and didn't store properly. We're all now on bear watch duty for the rest of the night. However, everyone's adrenaline levels were so high that they were unable to sleep. So, not basically seen but heard. We were a group of 4, my girlfriend, 2 friends, and me. We had a fun evening at home drinking and playing video games because we all had a day off the next day. We really didn't care about the time. At about 1 a.m., my friends told me they were taking the train home. My girlfriend and I went with them to the train station, and then we saw that they missed the last train, so we decided to walk with them home about 6 kilometers. The way is all through a forest. We had a good time listening to music and singing along. Suddenly I hear something that sounded like a scream. I told everyone, "Yo, have you heard that?" My girlfriend said, "Nah, that was a deer or something, stop it." Then we moved on. About 2 minutes later, I hear the scream again and told them again. They didn't believe me, and as I tried to explain to them, we all heard it loud and clear. "Help!" from a woman. It was so loud and frightening, we were immediately sober. The woman screamed for help nonstop, and we couldn't see shit. In this pitch-dark forest, we were trying to locate the screams, but it was pretty hard because of the echo. I said, "Hello, I'm here, don't worry." At that moment, we believed a woman had fallen or lost her way. Meanwhile, we called the police. They arrived pretty fast, but there were no screams since then. As we tried to explain our story to the police, she screamed again, and the 2 officers ran immediately into the dark. They found her, but we never got the chance to know what happened there. We heard that it was a woman who was armed by 3 men. The police told us to leave, that they would take the woman with them. They thanked us, and we called a taxi. I don't know how to upload videos here, but there is a video. Well, I have an in-the-woods story. When I was 9, my mother wanted to go hiking at a state park close to where we lived, and this would be the first time my little brother or I went hiking. We took 2 water bottles each to the park, but we ended up only bringing 1 when we went on the actual hike. My mom checked the time on her cell phone before we walked in. It was 10 a.m. After she checked time, she led the way onto the trail. It was really beautiful in the woods, like those types of woods that fairies would live in. We all finished our water and followed the signs for the trail, but we still weren't finding our way out. My mom went to check her phone. It was black and it would not turn on at all. We walked for what felt like maybe an hour or 2 at most since we started, but we really couldn't tell without a phone. A few minutes later, my mom saw a trail that may lead to the highway, and we could get help back to the car. As soon as we stepped out of those woods, I could hear my mom's phone go off, and it scared the crap out of me. My mom looked at the phone and was shocked that it said 6 p.m. We'd have been lost in the dark without that trail. It was an hour until dark. The scariest part, however, was the fact that we had passed that section of the woods 3 times because I remembered seeing this misshapen rock with moss and red polka-dotted mushrooms. When I saw it the first time, I told my brother that's where the fairies play, and it cheered him up. Every time we walked past that rock, not once until the last time did my mom or any of us see a trail to the road. My brother and I never wanted to go on a hike, but my mom said it would be fun and forced us to go. I'm just glad we made it out alive, but I'm sure as hell never going hiking again. I was actually a scout a few years ago, and there's one scene that almost made me run away from our camp. I and 2 other scouts had the night shift. Everything was going normal until around 2 or 3 in the morning when a strange shadow passed, running close to the latrine. At the beginning, we thought that would be someone doing their stuff, but the shadow just kept appearing in random places around the camp. It could be an animal indeed, but I doubt that there are animals taller than a human running around at night in that forest. Most animals were small. Our shift ended about 5 a.m. and yeah, that's it. We never found out what the thing was. It was really scary at the time. I was lucky enough to not be on patrol finding people committing suicide. There are tales of what's known as the kitchen sink suicide. A parked car with a noticeable film on the inside is approached from a remote location. People put all the chemicals they can find under their sink in a bucket or so and just cook themselves. Please avoid cars on their own. The number of accidents, though, I've almost had to take the lead on. People will take their nice car or really fast bike in the forest and take turns too fast. And then it's a search team looking for the bike that gets projected over the ledge and a snapped neck somewhere near the road. I was backpacking through Dark Canyon, Utah with a group of people, and we set up a base camp for the last couple of days there in the center of where the different canyons branch off. We were near a stream with a sandy shore where we were camped. I woke up in the night to drums and chanting, but I couldn't tell where it was coming from. It creeps me out because it's in the middle of nowhere and there are Indian wall paintings nearby. Plan to go back there at some point. Another time in the White Mountains, New Hampshire, was coming down from a mountain in mid-September, was nearly at the bottom, and the sun was going down. And this younger guy was going up the mountain with no pack, and his nose was bashed like he fell. My friend and I looked at each other and kept going, figuring maybe drugs. Also in the White Mountains, I was doing a 30-mile loop, the Pemi Loop. I hiked 18 miles the first day and packed really light. I just bought a tarp, sleeping bag, and sleeping pad. I went to set up camp and had my bag, sleeping bag, and tarp set up. I changed my clothing and went to get some sleep, and all I saw were hundreds of spiders everywhere on my gear and all around my area. So I moved it to the top of the mountain. There were still lots of spiders everywhere. At this point, I didn't care and barely slept with all the spiders. Again, the thing I like about these stories is that although they're the kind of almost sort of humanoid, cryptid, supernatural thing, most of these are just grounded in reality. Oftentimes, isolation in the woods has the mind wander, and the littlest noise is amplified by 10. Then if you throw wild animals into the mix, it could be an uncomfortable night of sleep, even if you're very experienced. I was in a tent by myself, with friends already asleep in other tents nearby, in a random clearing in the woods at a state park. It's eerily quiet outside, but the silence is suddenly shattered by what sounds like a woman screaming bloody murder from the tree line, maybe 50 yards from our tent. My body froze and my heart started beating faster than I've ever felt it before. A minute or so passes, and I hear it again, but even closer and louder. So I start holding my breath, trying to make as little noise as possible. I never heard it again, but I definitely didn't sleep a wink for the rest of the night. It had been raining the night before, so it was a little muddy around our campsite. When the sun finally came up, and I worked up the courage to go outside, there were mountain lion prints all around the tents. I know the mountain lion probably had no idea we were there, but it was still terrifying to think about it skulking around right next to us. That noise still pops up in my nightmares, often. I didn't see this thing in the woods exactly, but the mountains or wilderness of New Mexico are pretty close. The exact details of the story aren't super crystal clear since this happened when I was super young, I think around 6 or 7, not too sure. It was like '05 to 2006. I went to New Mexico with my dad to go see my grandfather, who was living in Cimarron at the time. We absolutely loved to go camping back then, so toward the end of the trip, my dad and I decided to go pitch up the tent and stay the night at a campsite around 30 minutes from where my grandpa was. I remember there being a sign there saying to tie up any food you have above your campsite so that bears wouldn't get it. Later that night, after going to sleep, I woke up to something moving close by the tent. I look up and see the silhouette of a full-grown adult bear right outside my tent. As a 6-year-old, this is pretty terrifying. My dad was fast asleep and was one of those people that gets super pissed when you try to wake him up, so I just kind of sat there, watching this bear trying to get our food before giving up and walking away. That was the only time I truly pissed myself, lol. As a 19-year-old looking back on it, it was kind of funny to watch that bear trying to jump to get our food. I went back to the campsite like a year later when it was off-season with my dad and found a fully functional Game Boy Advance SP on the ground with Lego Star Wars 2 inside, so that was a plus. There was no one else there, so I called dibs, so that was a win in my book despite being absolutely terrified the year prior. Joined a hiking club in middle school around the 7th grade. We took a night hike to some national or state park in the California desert. It was around 10 p.m. when we started heading back, and when returning, I and my friend saw a large pair of red glowing eyes out of nowhere. Luckily for us, our flashlights had died and we were pretty far behind the leader. We bolted toward where we saw the smoke from our fire and were safe for a good while until we went to our tents. There were approximately 4 people per tent, and I shared my sleeping quarters with the same friends who had witnessed the red-eyed monster earlier. We slept, and I woke up at around 2 to 4 a.m. to something pawing at our tent. With me being tired and my anxiety being high, I ended up closing my eyes, saying it was my imagination or the wind, and going back to sleep terrified. Get up the next morning at around 9, and there are 3-toed, more like claw, footprints on our tent that come in a weird arrangement of 3 feet that would be hind legs and 2 feet that would be in the front. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not going camping anytime soon, especially not in that same park. When I was around the age of 7 or 6, I went camping with my family and their friends. On the last day, we were going on a hike to enjoy the views one last time before we left, and to our surprise, we saw a gigantic pile of bones with fur carefully placed beside it in a pile. We didn't know what kind of animal it was, since there wasn't a skull or anything else apart from bones similar to ones of persons' legs, and the fur was a light gray color, so we were all confused regardless. The bones were also picked clean, and the fur seemed like it was carefully brushed and taken care of before being set off to the side. We all thought it was fake or a prank someone had pulled, but there was a slightly bad foul smell. Before we found the bones, everything was strange in the forest we were in. Animals behaved strangely, and people were strangely creepy. Once I woke up in the middle of the night to see the shadow of a tall man standing in front of our tent. That's one of the reasons why I'm terrified of camping. I was backpacking on the Appalachian Trail with my troop. I and 2 of other friends were hammocking in a stack of 3. I was on top, which was a pain when I had to pee later. We were all tired and fell asleep pretty fast. Around 11:30, we heard the most blood-curdling scream I've ever witnessed, but there are a few others remember hearing it. The hammock trio were all wide awake, frantically searching for our flashlights and the biggest knife we brought, thinking somebody just died and we were next. All of my stuff had fallen. I'm now on top of what I like to call a bear feeding station with nothing, so I just wait and hope that I'm out of reach of whatever could kill me. I heard every little sound the rest of the night. After a very bad night, with a total of what felt like 45 minutes of sleep, we exchanged stories of what we thought happened. It turns out that it was another guy in our troop who thought he saw a bear in his tent. It was somebody snoring. I still don't understand how he could scream that high and loud. I also can't find the right words to describe how badly the scream terrified me then. During the 90s, in my neck of the woods, no pun intended, there was a surge of interest in men's sensitivity groups. I had no awareness of them at the time, but basically a middle-aged white dude on his fourth wife would get a bunch of other middle-aged white dudes on their fourth wives, respectively, together. They'd beat drums, dress like badly stereotyped Native Americans, and hang out in the woods. Sometimes they'd primal scream at the moon or go on barefoot hikes in the snow. I was out in the woods a few hundred yards from my house, looking for my sister's missing cat, and I stumbled onto their campsite during deserted daylight hours. There were rope swings, ladders, and nets strung throughout the trees, like some bizarre man-made spider web. There was a giant teepee made of a blue tarp, a fire pit, and a bunch of carved logs set up around it, church pew style. There was a fairly hideous homemade mask in the teepee, which included skull motifs, and a stick decorated with fur and claws, which was apparently a ceremonial object that had to be held by whoever wished to speak non-gibberish to the rest of the group. There was also a large locked trunk. Yes, I tried to open it. I was intensely curious and very naive. I'd not been shown much respect for my things while growing up, and at this point in my life, I had very little sense of such for others. Little backstory here to how I learned my lesson that nature doesn't mess around. Arkansas, the natural state. Resident here, I do a side job called trail running. There's a whole bunch of names for it. It's where we work with a tour guide escorting a group by scouting out the nature locations a few days in advance to see if there are any hindrances to said nature attraction, such as flooded creeks, fallen trees, etc. Usually I hunt waterfalls because there are about 300 in Arkansas and they attract tourists, but most of them have no trail to get to the locations, so I document a path. This isn't a foolproof strategy, as I get off course sometimes by miles. I also preferred traveling by myself and doing the job alone. That was a big mistake, as I enjoyed the isolation, but sometimes I'd have a friend tag along since they wanted a little money. We don't know what to expect when we search for a path, so to protect against wildlife and the elements, we essentially are armed to the teeth. Our kit involves knee-high steel-toed wading boots, 2 machetes, a flare gun, and you get the gist. Now, for the story. I had one job, finding another way to a waterfall called Bowers Hollow, as the main trail was flooded since waterfall season is from October to August and it rains a lot. I found a back road that got me into the marked forest area, except the road was no longer a road but a mudslide of some sort and had wiped out the road a long time ago. The road descended into a canyon, and the mudslide repeatedly collided with it, forcing me to abandon my vehicle. The water was gradually removing the dirt from the road, allowing me to cross it on foot. After about 2 hours of hiking down, I came across a flooded creek, which usually is a good sign because it means there's a waterfall nearby. I hiked downstream for about 3 miles and came across an old Subaru SUV. The vehicle had clearly been there a long time and had scratch marks on the rusted exterior. The vehicle also had an Ontario, Canada license plate, meaning that this person probably wasn't familiar with Arkansas wilderness. The right back window was smashed thoroughly, with glass in the interior of the car, and bits of cloth on the shattered glass still in the window. The left back window was cracked badly. It had not shattered just yet, but was bending outward in the shape of the top of a head. There were black splotches all over the degraded interior of the car. To the left of the car, facing downstream, was an untouched campsite with old cans and rocks arranged into a campfire with obvious signs that it was untouched for years. I knew that this probably occurred a long time ago, maybe before I was even born. I was 18 at the time, but I got out of there pretty quick. Concluded with the trail guide that a mountain lion had probably attacked the person in their sleep, marked up the zone as dangerous wildlife, and have never taken a job in that area since. I was at an outdoor camp quite a while ago. I was in weatherproof, alone, since the only other boy was taking advantage of the warm late spring evening. About 9 o'clock, I was in the tent reading when I heard a shrill scream in the distance. I thought not much of it. Bats are known for the way they scream and they came from, but a few hissing growls were heard, and I was a bit scared but got increasingly more concerned as footsteps of what I could tell was a light but large four-legged creature approached. Suddenly, I could hear growls on the stairs leading up. Quickly, I pulled the sleeping bag over my head and tried to stay as quiet as possible. Claws were now scraping across the wood floors of the weatherport, and I heard a hiss. I got tenser and quickly reached out for my carving knife and retracted my arm back under the sleeping bag. This continued a long while, so long I began to ignore the creature's presence and let my mind wander off. After a time, I heard a leap onto the ground near the weatherport. When I woke up the next morning, I heard the girls talk about scratches under their weatherport with a 3 to 4 foot clearance under it. While I'm on about this story, here are a few other settings on the camp. Once loud gunshots were heard near the premises. A hunter came out to apologize and explained he saw a bobcat and fired his pistol in the air to scare it off. One weekend, we came to the news that all the camp sheep were murdered save one, the fattest, most lazy ram. The theory is he approached the bobcat for food, so the bobcat was by the sheep's approach. When I visited the pen, it was a grisly massacre, with corpses hung on the fence, their half-eaten guts hanging out. I was a senior Girl Guide ranger for 2 years in Canada. There's a private lake out near the mountains we would take the younger girls to, as the lake was shallow and ideal for canoe lessons. I never liked the site, as it was more of a swamp and therefore always smelled like rotten eggs, but it was fun to go up there with my unit. We were all excellent friends, and an odd cast of characters in general. Despite our differences and interests, one thing we all shared was our belief in the paranormal, particularly myself, my sister, and our resident witch R, who is pretty much impossible to scare. Anyways, about a year ago, we were out there for our annual backpacking trip. There were about 7 of us, minus the leaders. We were tenting in a meadow that was about a 5-minute walk from the bathrooms and a 10-minute walk from the boat launch or main recreational area. The woods in the area are super dense, and at night, it's pretty much impossible to see 2 feet ahead of you. Our second night, halfway through the trip, I got up in the middle of the night to use the washroom. Since we're in bear country, and it's also pitch black, I woke up my sister to come with me. The path to the bathrooms was narrow and dark, even with our flashlights. As we walked, I started getting increasingly paranoid that someone was following us through the trees. My sister had noticed it too. There was brush moving somewhere in the distance, like something was walking next to us as quietly as possible. By the time we made it to the outhouse, I was well and truly scared out of my mind. As I stood in the clearing with my light out, waiting for my sister, the noise we heard got closer. This weird snuffling noise, almost like a bear, started emanating from the trees around me. Now, I know what a bear sounds like. Whatever that was, it was not a bear. It sounded more like a labored breathing, if the person breathing had had their throat shredded by a weed whacker. It was wet and loud, and getting very close. I banged on the outhouse door, yelling for my sister to get out, and when she did, Her eyes were just as big as I imagined mine were. We sprinted back to camp, relying on our dim flashlights and muscle memory to get us back safe. That noise followed us all the way back. In the morning at breakfast, I asked R if she had heard anything weird the previous night. She nodded, and when I recounted the story to her, she confirmed that she had heard the noise too. Concerned, we went to our leaders, who were talking to the leaders of a guide group staying down at the other side. The guide leaders were talking about packing up early because of a weird noise that had occurred some time during the night and scared all the girls. Creepy, right? It gets worse. That day, we were supposed to be marking exit trails with flagging tape. We divided into groups of 4, and while I didn't encounter anything unusual, my sister did. Here's what she told me. Their path took them up a hill we called the Ridge. The Ridge is the camp's highest point, and if you make it to the top, you'll be rewarded with a stunning view. As they were standing there, one of the girls suddenly froze up and stared down the hill at something. My sister and the 2 other girls turned to ask what she was looking at, only to be struck speechless by what they saw. There was something humanoid watching them from the meadow. The tall, thin creature was staring directly at them. It was too bright to look at, almost painful in its light. It watched them for a moment longer, and then they blinked, and it was gone. To this day, we still don't know what it was, but whatever had stalked us the night in the woods, it had not been there to play.